We are streaming, we're off the record. Are we streaming live on YouTube now?
We are now streaming.
And are there any members of the general public who are listening or are joining us?
Yes.
Oh, there is. Okay, we just don't see them because they're not participants, but they're out there.
Yes, we have 27 attendees currently.
Oh, good. So my remarks will be addressed primarily to them. Let's go on the record, David, if you would. Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to this remote public comment hearing in the Energy Facilities Siting Board docket EFSB 22-02, DPU 22-18, DPU 22-19. This case involves the petitions of Medway Grid LLC to construct a battery energy storage system and electric substation in Medway. The battery energy storage system would be capable of storing up to 500 megawatt hours of energy, and it could transmit this energy to the electric grid at the rate of 250 megawatts. We will refer to the proposed construction of the battery energy storage system and the adjacent substation as the project. My name is Robert Shea. I am the presiding officer in this proceeding, and I am conducting the remote public comment hearing tonight. As you can see on your Zoom video stream, there are other people with me from the siting board who will be involved in the review of this project. Let me introduce them now. Andrew Green, the director of the siting division, Joan Foster Evans, the general counsel of the siting division, and John Young, the technical director of the siting division. Council and company representatives for Medway Grid are also participating remotely on the Zoom public comment hearing. Using Zoom, the public will have a full opportunity to see and hear everything said during this hearing and to offer comments and to ask questions. For those of you accessing the meeting by phone dial-in, you too can hear everything and have an opportunity to comment or to ask questions. The instructions on how to participate were provided in the public comment hearing notice that was published in the newspapers and in the notices sent to addresses near the project. The public comment hearing notice was also posted to the Medway Grid website. In addition, you can find the notice on the website for the siting board under EFSB siting calendar and today's date. Furthermore, the entire petition is available in 3 places. First, on the siting board's website, and secondly, on the company's website, and finally, on the town of Medway website. The URL for each of these websites is printed in the notice that was sent out. Please note that this public comment hearing is being recorded and will be published to YouTube. I will now briefly describe the project and the nature of the filings made by Medway Grid related to the project and the legal standards that govern the siting board's project review. Next, I will allow the company to make a presentation regarding the project. After that presentation, I will open the floor to comments and questions from members of the public who wish to offer oral comments tonight. Please note that we will also review any written comments submitted by the public through email, as long as they are sent by the close of business on Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. The battery energy storage system and the adjacent substation will be located on approximately 5.2 acres of a 10.6 acre parcel of land located on the south side of Milford Street in Medway. The battery energy storage system would be surrounded by a combination of a security fence and a sound attenuation barrier. The security fence would be at least 8 feet tall, and the sound attenuation barrier would be 22 feet high on the north and east sides of the battery energy storage system. The adjacent substation would convert the energy from the storage system to a higher voltage. An underground transmission line would convey the electricity at this higher voltage from the adjacent substation to an existing Eversource West Medway substation. The underground transmission line would be approximately 1/4 of a mile long. Medway Grid has filed 3 petitions, one with the Massachusetts Energy Facilities Siting Board and 2 with the Department of Public Utilities. these three petitions have been consolidated for review by the citing board. The citing board petition was filed under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 164, Section 69J and 1/4. Under this statute, the citing board will review the company's filing to determine whether the proposed project would provide a reliable energy supply for the Commonwealth with a minimum impact on the environment at the lowest possible cost. Medway Grid also filed a petition under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 164, Section 72. Under Section 72, the citing board will determine whether the project is necessary, serves the public convenience, and is consistent with the public interest. Finally, Medway Grid also seeks approval under General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 3, for certain individual zoning exemptions and a comprehensive exemption for the project from the Medway zoning bylaws. Under Chapter 40A, Section 3, the citing board will determine whether the requested zoning exemptions are required for the project and whether the present or proposed use of the land or structures is reasonably necessary for the public convenience and welfare. There are multiple ways that the public can participate in the citing board's review of the project. First is to provide oral comments at the public comment hearing. As I stated before, you may also file written comments. Written comments are due by July 27th, 2022. In addition, you may choose to seek participation as an intervener or as a limited participant. The deadline for requesting participation as an intervener or as a limited participant is Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. This date is also the deadline to provide written comments as outlined in the notice of public comment hearing. We would encourage anyone who does seek to participate to review the material published on the citing board website, which outline the different ways in which you can participate in our proceedings. For example, you may participate as a full intervener. A full intervener has rights to ask discovery questions of the company, to present witnesses, to ask questions of witnesses testifying at the hearings, to file briefs and motions, and to appeal the decision of the citing board. In the alternative, you may participate as a limited participant. A limited participant can receive filings made in this proceeding and may file briefs with the citing board. The information on participation is also in the public comment hearing notice for this proceeding. If you would like a copy of the notice and intervention rules, please send your contact information to my email at robert.j.shea, S-H-E-A, @mass.gov, and I can send you the information to you by email. So next, I'll turn to counsel. May I have the appearance of counsel, please?
Sure. Good evening. On behalf of Medway Grid LLC, I am Andrew Kaplan of the law firm of Pierce Atwood at 100 Summer Street, Boston, Mass. 02110.
Thank you. Mr. Kaplan, could I ask you to introduce the other people or representatives of the company who are participating in this video call?
Sure. We have Christina Wolf, who is Senior Vice President of Development, Justin Adams, who is Head of Engineering, and we have Mark Bergeron from Epsilon.
Thank you. Would the company like to begin its presentation regarding the proposed project? After that presentation, we will open the floor for comments and questions from the public.
We would. Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer, and Christina Wolf will begin on behalf of the company.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, first of all, for taking the time to join this public comment hearing and share your input on Medway Grid. I think that a lot of you have probably participated in previous presentations we've given to the community. So we're going to try to provide just a quick recap for those of you who may not be familiar with the project, and we'll reserve the rest of the night for public comment. I think next slide would be. Great. So As was stated at the outset, Medway Grid is seeking approval from the Energy Facilities Siting Board to construct a 250 megawatt and 500 megawatt hour battery storage facility, which includes a project substation and an underground transmission line at 340 kV. And that underground transmission line connects the facility to the EverSource substation. Included with our petition is a request for exemption from a few provisions of the zoning bylaw. A few additional details about the project, some of which again were touched on at the outset. It is located at the addresses known as 49, 53, and 55 Milford Street. This assemblage of land is immediately east of the EverSource Regional Transmission Corridor, which some of you may be familiar with as you drive across along Milford Street. The three addresses comprising the project site total 10.6 acres. Approximately 3.1 of those acres have been previously disturbed, and the project footprint maximizes the use of those previously disturbed areas. Total footprint, as was stated earlier, 5.2 acres or a little less than half of the site, and the remainder of the site will be preserved as forested woodland. Next slide, please. So just before I talk about the project need and benefit, I just wanted to give you a quick summary of how battery energy storage facilities work. Many of you may know this already, but they store energy at times of oversupply and can then provide that energy to the grid at times of peak demand. And they're frequently located near very large substations so that they can both pull a lot of power off of the substation and send a lot of power onto the substation. So battery storage facilities essentially function almost like an extension of the substation. They are essentially a piece of transmission infrastructure that can help the regional grid function more effectively. And I mentioned that just because it sort of helps to explain the purpose and need a little bit. Two primary reasons for developing the project. One is that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a goal to have 1,000 megawatt hours of battery storage deployed by 2025. And that's in furtherance of its other climate goals relating to the deployment of solar and wind throughout the state. So the more of these non-dispatchable resources, as they're called, like solar and wind, that come onto the grid, the more storage is needed to be able to make use of these resources. This is typically very low cost power, and battery storage projects help us not to waste it, even if it's being generated at times that it's not needed. Battery storage facilities, as some of you know, do not need to be located near to the wind or solar facilities in order to achieve this benefit or make use of that power. So the second reason we're developing the project is that the ISO New England, the operator of the New England Regional Transmission System, identified that the Southeastern Capacity Zone required more capacity to support the grid in this location, in this general region, I should say, and awarded the project a capacity contract, obligating us to supply these 250 megawatts to the grid by June of 2024. So now we're going to flip over to the site plan and give you a quick spin through it just to kind of orient you. And this is the site plan that was submitted in our EFSB filing. We'll just kind of point out some of the key project features. Just a note, though, that what you see as plan north on this plan is actually west. It's tilted on its side. So Route 109 and Milford Street is on the right-hand side, and that's actually north. So the primary feature that you see throughout the site is a series of rectangles, and those are 140 Tesla megapacks, each of which is 30 feet long, 5.5 feet wide, and 9 feet tall. And they are shipped to the site pre-assembled. They're installed on concrete slabs or pure foundations, and they basically look like shipping containers. Inside of them are racks of battery modules, an inverter, and a cooling system. Other components that you see on the site plan includes 70 transformers, so sort of on the edges of the battery cabinets, a stormwater management system, 2 new access drives, which will replace all of the existing curb cuts along Milford Street. So the existing curb cuts will be closed off, and there'll just be 2 for each drive. A combination of security fencing and a sound attenuation barrier, as you heard before. a vegetated buffer, the project substation, which is down on the south end of the site or the left side of the plan, which includes the main power transformer, switchgear, circuit breakers, and other electrical equipment. And then not shown on this drawing, the underground transmission line that goes across Eversource property to connect the project to the West Medway substation. One thing I want to point out on this drawing, just because we've received some questions about it over the last year or so, is that we've pre-planned for something called augmentation. And the gray hashed boxes that you see kind of in between the clear rectangles are a supplemental cabinet that Tesla adds as batteries degrade in the original cabinets to ensure that the facility can maintain its 500 megawatt hour obligation. So these additional cabinets do not increase the size of the facility beyond the 250 megawatt interconnection allowance. They merely ensure that the project can maintain the required power output of the facility over the years to come. And augmentation would not expand beyond what's shown on the plan. So here we're just showing what could be in future years. Just kind of wanted to point that out. So for the next slide, going back to the slide deck, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to talk about our environmental analysis.
Thank you, Christina. Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is Mark Bergeron with Epsilon Associates. We are the private consulting firm out of Maynard, Massachusetts, responsible for providing environmental consulting and permitting services for the Medway Grid project. First, I would like to provide a bit more context related to the existing conditions on the project site. The project site is not within or in close proximity to areas mapped as estimated or priority habitat for state listed species. There is a vegetated wetland system associated with Center Brook on the eastern portion of the project site. However, these wetlands are not identified as outstanding resource waters by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, also referred to as Mass DEP. Lastly, and as previously identified, the northern portion of the project site closest to Milford Street, where a majority of the proposed battery facility will be constructed, consists of previously developed areas and or areas that have been previously harvested for timber, and as such, potential environmental impacts associated with the project are minimal. The Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, also referred to as MEPA office, is reviewing the Medway Grid project to ensure that any potential environmental consequences are considered and studied, and to ensure that we take all feasible measures to avoid, minimize, and mitigate for any potential damage to the environment. In summary, the project has been designed to comply with all applicable state regulations and standards. First, there are zero emissions from the operation of the project, and the project will have no potential impacts from criteria pollutants that are typically associated with fossil fuel generation. Next, the project site is not within any areas mapped for public water supply. It does not generate any process-related wastewater for its operation, and it will have no connection to the town's sanitary sewer system. The company has completed detailed engineering calculations to design the stormwater management system for this project. A stormwater management report has been prepared and presented in the EFSB petition. In summary, the proposed stormwater management system for the project will include low-impact development techniques designed to capture, treat, and recharge stormwater runoff. This project will meet or exceed all applicable standards of the Mass DEP stormwater management standards and has been designed in consideration of the local bylaw requirements as well. In addition, the project has been designed to implement all applicable climate resilience design guidelines related to future potential extreme precipitation and is consistent and fully compliant with the MEPA interim protocol on climate change adaptation and resiliency. Next, there will be no direct impacts to vegetated wetlands, and the project will meet all state and local performance standards for other wetland resource areas on the project site. The company has also completed a site assessment for the potential to encounter solid or hazardous waste on the project site, and this assessment concluded that there are no known areas of contaminated soil or groundwater on the project site. The company will consult with a licensed site professional during construction of the project to ensure that any materials removed from the demolition of the existing structures on the site are handled and disposed of in accordance with all local and state standards and in coordination with the Massachusetts DEP office. Similarly, the company will follow all local requirements related to any fill being brought onto the project site, if applicable. There are no solid or hazardous waste streams from the operation of this facility, and over time, any degraded batteries will be replaced and handled in accordance with applicable federal and state regulations. Lastly, the battery modules do not contain liquids of any kind. Next, acoustic engineers have completed a sound level assessment report for the proposed project, which was included in the EFSB petition. As explained in the report, noise mitigation measures have been incorporated into the project's design to minimize the potential for operational noise to impact the surrounding public. These mitigation measures include low noise equipment, a sound attenuation barrier, and operational restrictions. Results of the complete sound level assessment demonstrate that the noise level from the facility will comply with the requirements set forth in the Mass DEP noise policy, as well as the recommended US EPA noise guidelines. Next, qualified cultural resource specialists have completed numerous studies on the project site in compliance with Massachusetts law and in consultation with the Massachusetts Historic Commission, also referred to as MHC. These studies include an initial due diligence, a sensitivity assessment, and intensive locational field surveys. All of these studies have proven the project site to have a low potential for cultural resources, and the company is in the process of finalizing consultation with MHC to ensure and confirm there is no effect on cultural resources, including both historical and archaeological, from the project. Lastly, potential impacts to traffic from construction of the project will be minimal, as existing truck routes, such as Route 495, which is in close proximity to the project site, will be utilized, and there will be close coordination with the local police department. Finally, there are no long-term impacts to traffic from operation of the project, as the facility is remotely monitored and controlled with only periodic visits for inspection and maintenance. I'll turn it over back to Christina now.
Thank you, Mark. So we have a lot of information on fire safety, much more than we could put on a slide. So I'll do my best to kind of just narratively discuss it, and I'll kind of try to keep it as brief as possible. But I think most importantly is that fire safety is of utmost concern to us as a company, and we're sure the residents of Medway, and most certainly the town of Medway, the elected officials and staff. The petition, Chapter 5, delineates the many codes and standards that the project will comply with. And these are requirements of our company, our insurance company, financing parties, and simply the project cannot be built without complying with these standards. So they're numerous, but they include UL 1973, UL 9540, UL 9540A, NFPA 1, NFPA 855, and the Massachusetts Comprehensive Fire Safety Code. The project and the equipment within the project are designed to minimize the risk of thermal events. And at both the cell level and at the system level, the Tesla Megapack is designed to perform safely in the unlikely event of a fire. And what happens in the UL 9540A testing protocol is that essentially full-scale fire testing is performed on the unit to see how it would fare. The Tesla Megapack 2 has received UL 9540A listing following this rigorous full-scale fire testing. And the Tesla Megapack 2 XL, which is a variation of that used in our design, is currently undergoing the certification. It's the newer model, so it's undergoing certification now. A product must have received UL certification before our company will procure it and utilize it in a project. So despite the low risk of a thermal event because of Tesla design, fire standards, et cetera, the project team has been working and will continue to work with Chief Lynch and town staff to maximize safety. And we're implementing additional measures within the project and with the town to essentially ensure that the fire department is educated and well prepared in case of a thermal event. Some of these, this is not inclusive of everything, but some of these protocols or measures include a comprehensive emergency response and operation plan, which will have detailed protocols from Tesla as manufacturer and O&M provider, as well as input and collaboration from the fire department. Annual trainings of the fire department from the battery manufacturer to ensure detailed and ongoing teachings on best practices. Annual funding to provide any additional training that the town deems is required to render emergency response services, as well as additional annual funding for general community emergency preparedness that may be related or unrelated to the project. Payment for appropriate tools and supplies to pay for adequate fire suppression materials that may be used by the fire department. Payment for any water that may be utilized for fire suppression efforts, and removal by the company of any water utilized in fire prevention in case of contaminants. Implementing Chief Lynch's preferences to ensure that the fire department receives emergency communications directly and immediately rather than through a dispatch. Input, both previous and ongoing, regarding internal circulation and street design to ensure long-term emergency access, as well as fire department review of the final site plan. So again, that list is not conclusive, but it gives you some examples of the additional measures beyond kind of what Tesla provides. Next slide, please. So we always welcome questions from the community. We're happy to correspond via email, set up phone conversations, set up meetings. Please do not hesitate to use this general email address, and we will get back to you both in the current development life cycle or later on in the development life cycle. Some of the folks on our team who might help to answer your questions include Justin Adams, our VP of Permitting, Mel Samaru, who is our civil engineering SME and our resident stormwater expert, Jim Lucht, who has built these projects across the country and can provide insight regarding the construction process, and Jason Yednak, who is our in-house electrical engineering lead, just to kind of give you a peek at some of the folks behind the scenes that might be answering your questions. So with that, we thank you again for your time and interest tonight, and we will turn it over to you so that we can hear your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I realize, and I apologize, I introduced most of our team. I did not introduce Wayne Wong, who is joining us from one of our EFSB employees and an analyst, and one of our the people who helps with does a lot of the IT. So with that correction, Mr. Kaplan, do you have anything else to add to what was just presented?
We do not, and we look forward to hearing comments from the public.
Okay. If we were in a physical meeting now, this is when the company would provide a certification of notice of the public comment hearing, certification that the notice that was sent out in accordance. So can I just ask you to send that to me electronically?
Yes, I expect that you'll have that tomorrow.
That'd be great. I appreciate that very much. Before we begin, I'm going to outline some guidelines to use in speaking at this hearing. There is a stenographer who is also participating remotely, and he will transcribe everything said during this hearing. The remote public comment hearing is also streamed to the Department of Public Utilities YouTube channel. It is only the transcript produced by the stenographer, however, that is the official record of this hearing. As we are all relying on the internet or telephones to participate, we could experience some technical difficulties, such as sound from speakers, including background noise, video and audio issues, and potential delays. Therefore, it is imperative to speak slowly and clearly, to allow the speaker before you to finish speaking before you begin speaking, and to pay attention to the video of the person speaking and to my video. I will raise my hand as a signal on my video if I need to interrupt the person currently speaking to ask them to stop. I may have to do that if I didn't understand something that was said, or if we have a technical difficulty that's brought to my attention. We appreciate everyone's cooperation in participating in this hearing. I apologize in advance for any technical difficulties that we may encounter through the course of this remote public comment hearing. If you have problems, please raise your hand using the Zoom toolbar or dial *9 on your phone if you are participating by phone. You may call or text 857-200-0065 for assistance. In the notice, we requested that anyone with interest in speaking notify the siting board in advance if possible. This is a great help due to the mechanics of the remote platform. We will begin with those federal, state, and local officials who wish to be heard. Then we will proceed with the members of the public who have signed up to speak in the order in which they have signed up. And finally, we will allow anyone who wishes to speak but did not have a chance to let us know in advance. Please give your name and address and spell your name for the stenographer, and please speak slowly and clearly. Again, please stop speaking if you see me raise my hand in the video. If a company response to a comment or question asked is appropriate, I will ask the company representatives if they would like to respond. So first of all, are there any public officials who wish to be heard? I understand that we had one public official sign up in advance, Michael Boynton, the town manager of the town of Medway. Mr. Boynton, would you like to participate? Would you like to speak? Yeah, there you are. Mr. Boynton, thank you.
Sorry about that. Folks, thank you very much for the opportunity. The town of Medway continues to work with Medway Grid folks. We have worked on the development of a host community agreement. We have reached, let's call it a draft agreement status on that at this point. We have that posted in our community for folks to peruse and to take a look at, and obviously to offer any comments. The town continues to work with Medway Grid on a so-called pilot agreement. That's also going to be very integral to the town's position on this as we move forward. But at this point in time, the conversations have been amicable. The town has been pleased with the participation of Medway Grid in a very cooperative manner with us. And we would will obviously be filing as an intervener so that the town can protect the interests of the community and obviously work to protect the interests of the residents that most closely about the project. But to date, the conversations and the dialogue have been positive, let's say. And I'm obviously available, sir, if there are any questions from your board, your team, and any members of the community relative to what the town's participation has been.
Thank you, Mr. Boynton. And I'll state, I think for the record, you are the town manager of the town of Medway. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. Are there any other public officials who would like to speak? You can raise your hand using the Zoom feature, and one of our staff will take the steps necessary to allow your comments to be heard by everyone and included in the transcript of the hearing. I don't see anyone else admitted. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. There is someone, Todd Alessandri. Mr. Alessandri, thank you for coming. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for the presentation and the information. My name is Todd Alessandri, 8 Dean Street in Medway. I'm also on the select board member, I'm on the select board, full disclosure. 2 questions I have relate to the safety aspects. The first one, you mentioned that, I believe in the presentation, that there will be no one on site full time. Is that correct?
It is correct.
In that case, if there is a fire event, something happens and the sensors pick up, what can we expect, or what's the sort of anticipated response time until we can, our fire department, Chief Lynch, can be notified, et cetera? How long does that typically take? And are there redundancies in the system to make sure that obviously we get that as rapidly as possible?
I can check with Christina as to whether there are redundancies. I can tell you that the system, that Chief Lynch asked that the system notify the fire department directly as opposed to going through a dispatch system. So the response time would be immediate.
Okay. And then in terms of the the design of or the layout of the batteries, and also you mentioned as much as possible trying to keep a buffer of vegetation and trees where possible. I guess my fear there would be if there is a fire, is there going to be sufficient buffer between the battery facilities and the existing vegetation so that there's not any transfer of the fire to the surrounding vegetation? Obviously, there is a neighborhood right, I wouldn't say directly, there's a neighborhood pretty close by that should that happen, it would be a major issue.
Yeah, there are rules and regulations as to where you can house these facilities, and so there's enough of a buffer away from the trees, and they're on concrete slabs with, I believe, gravel around them. So that should contain the fire within a certain area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alessandri. Are there any other public officials who would like to speak? Just raise your hand using the Zoom feature. Okay. I don't see any others.
There is one other individual who is now in the panel who raised his hand.
Yes, Mr. Travellini, I guess. Please, welcome and thank you for coming. You're muted, Mr. Travellini. You're muted. We can't hear you.
I apologize.
That's all right. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Hi, my name is David Travellini. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission. I live at 4 Riverview Street in Medway. My last name for your stenographer is spelled Travallini. And I just have a simple question, which is, will you guys be filing, or are you required to file a plan with the Conservation Commission in Medway?
Yes.
That was a simple answer. Okay, so just that was my only question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Travellini. I appreciate
you.
that. Are there any other public officials who would like to speak? Just raise your hand using the Zoom feature. I don't see any others. Let me see if I got.
Andy, you're muted. Sorry, Laura Mullen has raised her hand. I'll bring her into the panel.
Oh, good.
Hello.
Good evening, Ms. Mullen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for being here. So my name is Laura Mullen. I live at 17 Granite Street and I'm the town moderator in Medway. And I would like for anybody who can answer to tell us more of the upcoming steps connected to every element of this project. Like, what does Medway Grid see happening? Michael, how does this affect the residents who are interested but might not be abutters?
I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer. Are you asking Mr. Boynton?
I'm asking Medway Grid and Mr. Boynton. As I listen, it feels like a lot of the verbs you use. I'm an English teacher and a literacy specialist. A lot of the verbs make it sound like this is already in the works. And I'd like to just hear a little bit more from both sides, the town and Medway Grid, whether or not my understanding is accurate or inaccurate.
So we are before the Energy Facility Siting Board for approval of the project. So nothing can happen, at least until we get approval of the project, and then need to get building permits and go through the Conservation Commission with the town. In terms of, from the company's perspective, in terms of the Host Community Act, we've, as Christina said and Mr. Boynton said, we've pretty much negotiated an agreement, and it's before the town and select board for review and comment. And we're also working on a pilot program. So those would be the initial immediate next steps with the town and in terms of the approval process.
Can you tell me more about the pilot program?
Sure, I could probably jump in on that. So pilot is payment in lieu of taxes. The pilot agreement, for those in the community that remember, we obviously did this with Exelon several years ago. And we're following some of the same steps that we did with that process that also went through the EFSB. And I believe Ms. Foster Evans was the presiding officer. Joey was a presiding officer at that time for the Exelon piece. So we're familiar, quite familiar with the EFSB process. So I'll take a step back a little bit. Able Grid, now Medway Grid, had approached the town as many developers or project folks would do some time ago. In fact, the first meeting took place prior to the COVID days, and there was an indication that this was a site that they were looking at. It's not surprising about the site that they're looking at because of its proximity to the transmission lines and to the grid system that's in West Medway. We had very conceptual level discussions. We talked about the various steps that would be necessary if, in fact, there was a move to develop it through the zoning process. The property was not zoned and remains not zoned for this. However, we discussed where that might go. There was obviously some discussion and some debate, if you will, at town meeting in 2021 regarding the zoning issues. There was a moratorium placed on the creation of these types of facilities, pending study. The town did engage in a company called Arup, who has been doing that study piece to determine whether a facility of this nature could be built safely. We've had some findings relayed back to the planning board. The planning board was the body that the petition through town meeting directed to handle that. So the discussion of a host community agreement went full force, if you will, when the filing was made with the EFSB, because the filing with the EFSB obviously removes the local jurisdiction and would therefore require the town to be in a position of protecting its interests. And that's essentially what we've done through the host community agreement, is work on protecting the interests. Everything from landscaping issues for direct abutters, noise concerns, environmental concerns, water runoff concerns, fire safety. There is an extensive amount of information in the host community agreement regarding fire safety. The pilot discussion, I will be very candid. We're not on the same page at this point. I'm hoping that we can get there. The host community agreement has not been signed. It is up for discussion by the board, and that will take place during the month of August. I'm hoping that we will have further conversations with the Medway Grid folks prior to that relative to the pilot. The pilot, as you know, Laura, now has to go to, if it is negotiated, and it's not a requirement, mind you, if it is negotiated and recommended by the select board, it has to go to town meeting and has to be approved by the residents of the town. So that piece still has to go to town meeting. The host community agreement, as I mentioned, is before the select board. They are reviewing each piece of it, and we've made publication to the town website of that. And we've already had a few comments in relative to that to the office. The host community agreement is an approval strictly of the select board in the town of Medway. It would be our recommendation and our hope that in any agreement such as that would be included in the proceedings of the EFSB and part of any type of decision that would be issued by EFSB. And the town, if we are unsuccessful with a pilot agreement, then the town would simply do what's called an ad valorem tax. We will tax it to the highest value on an annual basis. So that is making the assumption, and strictly that's an assumption at this point, that the EFSB would grant approval of the project as presented. So this is the we're not even at the 5-yard line. We are at the very beginning piece. But obviously, we've done what we need to do. We're going to continue to do that to protect the interest of the town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mullet. Are there any other public officials who would like to speak? Mr. Green, is anyone waiting in the waiting room?
I do not see any other hands raised in response to your question, so we can turn to our pre-registered speakers. I believe our next commenter would be Charles Myers, who we can bring into the panel.
Yes, Mr. Myers has signed up to speak in advance. If you're there, Mr. Myers.
I want to thank the EFSB for the opportunity to speak at the public hearing this evening. As a 30-year resident of Medway with a nearly 2 decade of experience as both a former elected and appointed official in Medway, I offer the EFSB 4 reasons why Medway Grid should not be allowed to bypass Medway zoning. 1, Medway Grid will store 500 megawatts of energy releasable over a 2-hour period as 250 megawatts per hour. The Medway Grid project is not a zero emission activity as it is not linked to a renewable resource. The process of storing, absorbing, and releasing BESS energy, according to the U.S. Energy Information Agency, has a round-trip efficiency of approximately 82%. That means there's an 18% loss of energy for the absorption, storage, and release process to occur. Based on the efficiency losses to store 500 megawatts, Medway Grid will require 610 megawatts of grid power. Due to the 82% efficiency, Medway Grid will lose 110 megawatts of energy for each 500 megawatt use cycle. Technically, that makes Medway Grid a consumer of energy. Energy from Medway Grid is planned to be acquired in the evening hours overnight. There's no solar overnight and wind is marginal. So the 610 megawatts will be generated using fossil technologies, generating emissions that will impact a broader population in Massachusetts. The generation of those additional 110 megawatts of emissions does not make Medway Grid a site for the public good. It makes Medway Grid a use emissions demand source. Medway Grid is in effect causing emissions not otherwise required for Massachusetts residents and should not be qualified as for the social good, thus should not be allowed to bypass Medway zoning. 2, if Medway Grid is allowed to bypass local zoning and conservation requirements, proactive protection of local environment and resilience will be at risk. For example, the installation of power plant oil tanks requires dikes around the tanks to proactively protect the environment against the possibility of a future tank rupture or valve failure. Battery energy storage systems can and have experienced thermal events that have lasted days and required thousands of gallons of water, as recorded in the EPRI BESS event database. Tesla gas units will self-consume. However, defensive water spray to prevent fire propagation is required. A Tesla BESS Australian event demonstrated that indeed the thermal event can spread first within a single megapack and then to the adjacent megapack, lasting for several days. During that time, chemistry is released and toxic gas is created, as documented by third-party reviews done in Santa Barbara, California. Tesla claims to offer a UL 9540A product. The applicant offers no Tesla certificate document, nor has the applicant offered a copy of the Tesla UL 9540A test, from which both responder and environmental response plans may be created. Though other Tesla products are listed in the UL 9540A test approved database, the Megapack is not one of those listings. As in Australia, an event in Medway would conservatively generate more than 24,000 gallons of contaminated defensive water for containment against leakage into the adjacent wetland and riverfront areas. The current site does not lay out to feature retention design with a capacity of holding at least 24,000 gallons of contaminated water outside the combined wetland riverfront limits. So as laid out, Medway Grid does not include the same proactive protection power plant oil tanks are given. Third, zoning protects the resilience of Medway's Massachusetts Route 109. Route 109 is a major regional transportation artery providing access to Route 495 and the Milford Regional Hospital. Medway Grid proposes to locate Tesla Megapacks as close as 35 feet from the arterial Route 109. In a thermal event within the Medway site, Medway fire apparatus and responding crew will be parked on Route 109, effectively shutting down this key arterial for the region for as long as a Megapack self-consumes. That shutdown could be 3 days for only one Megapack, longer if the fire propagates to another Megapack on site. Remember, they're installed back to back. The equipment and site cleanup would add additional hours and possibly days to the shutdown of 109. More towns than just Medway use this arterial to transport medical emergencies to the Milford Regional Hospital. That localized knowledge is yet another reason why Medway Grid should not be allowed to waive zoning bylaws. Fourth and last, I'll provide one last justification for not bypassing Medway zoning bylaws. The Medway Grid site directly abuts a residential neighborhood that includes a daycare preschool facility. A thermal event generates toxic gases as demonstrated by the same California review I mentioned earlier. Imagine a 30-hour or longer event where the resulting toxic gas and vapors will go. Next, consider the wind ROSE, ROSE, used by Exelon and earlier projects, which shows that the majority of the time the wind blows west to east at that location. The wind will direct the toxic gas and fumes to both the residential abutters and the daycare preschool. The thermal event toxic gas release over a 30+ hour period impacting direct residential abutters is yet another and final reason for not granting Medway Grid's request. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Is there anyone else from the general public who would like to speak?
We have another commenter or two on deck coming to the panel now.
Good, that's wonderful.
Hello?
Hello.
Sorry, I'll turn this there. Hi, Adam Hauser. I live in Medway, Little Tree Road. And I just have a question, and it's, I think, directed to the EFSB. I'm curious, can you clarify the EFSB's jurisdiction over storage systems versus generation units and what the stance is on that? I mean, based on what I could read in the Massachusetts law, generation units doesn't seem to be defined, and this is a storage versus generation. Do you have any insight on that?
Does anyone here want to take that question?
I'd be happy to. The company may have their own opinion about this question, but this case has been filed under Section 69J of Chapter 164 of Massachusetts General Laws, which I think you're alluding to as the section that relates to EFSB jurisdiction of generating facilities over 100 megawatts. This facility is over 100 megawatts, and it has been filed with the board pursuant to that statutory provision. To this point, the siting board has not rendered a decision on a battery storage facility over 100 megawatts. So this is one of the early cases of this type of facility, and we are pursuing our review under the section that the case was filed.
Excuse me, Andy, that would be Section 69J and a quarter. And that's what it was, and that's what it was filed under. And that is the standard that we're reviewing it under.
Okay, so it's based on over the megawatt hours, not necessarily whether it's a generation versus a storage facility or system.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Andy.
There is a statutory definition of what a generating facility is, and it is also defined as being 100 megawatts or greater in the statute. That is quite clear that this proposed facility exceeds the 100 megawatt threshold.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It's as clear as it can, I suppose.
Mr. Shea, perhaps the company would like to chime in on that. They filed the petition. They may want to offer their perspective.
Mr. Kaplan.
The position of the company is that because the capacity is being provided to ISO New England, and ISO New England considers a battery energy storage facility to be a generator asset, the process that we have to go under for FERC and for at ISO and at the state is as a generator asset. So we're a generator asset that's over 100 megawatts, and that's why it comes under General Laws, Chapter 164, 69J and a quarter.
Okay. Yeah, and because I'd been on some, I mean, it seems like a few years ago, I think Christina had presented to some town committee or whatever, and at that time, you know, it wasn't, EFSB was brought up by someone from the town, and the position on Medway Grid or Able Grid at the time was that they weren't seeking to go the EFSB route. So I was just curious, was the shift because we had to get around zoning bylaws, or is it
No,
something that is a must? Because it seems like most BESS facilities try to avoid going through the FSB route in terms of what I've seen in the dockets and things I've read.
yes. It had nothing to do with the zoning exemption. It had to do with the fact that it's a generator asset over 100 megawatts, and therefore we filed it under the proper statute at the state.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hauser, we usually request that people spell their last name and give an address if they could. I don't know if we've been doing
sure.
that, but
Yeah,
but
no
since
problem.
your key was AAH, I knew I didn't know how to spell your name.
It's Adam, Adam, Hauser, Houser, and it's 14 Little Tree Road.
Thank you.
That's Little Tree Road?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hauser. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Sorry about that. Our next commenter will be Paul Yorkis, I believe, if I got that right.
Good evening, Mr. Yorkis. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Yorkis, Y-O-R-K-I-S as in Sam. I reside at 7 Independence Lane here in Medway. And I have a series of questions. The first question actually is for you, Mr. Shea. And
Okay.
that is, could you please explain to everybody who is on this Zoom how and who will be making the decision once all the hearings are completed?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Yorkis. The decision is made by a board, the Energy Facilities Siting Board, and that is a 9-member board and is made up of people who are on in the governor's cabinet, the head of the Department of Energy Resources, the Mass Department of Environmental Protection, and other environmental and land use agencies. So the heads of those, and then there are 3 public members who are not with the government, and one is usually a representative of labor unions, and another has expertise in the energy area, and so on. So it's the Energy Facilities Siting Board. None of the members of the Energy Facilities Siting Board are here tonight. We are the staff of the Siting Board, and what we do is we assemble the comments and the evidence. The company has filed a very large petition with a lot of evidence there, and then when people in the town, Mr. Boynton mentioned that the town of Medway is likely to intervene. If anyone else is likely to intervene, if anyone else does intervene, those people have a chance to ask questions both in writing and at evidentiary hearings. And eventually, and we ask questions. Even if no one intervenes, we ask a lot of questions in writing and then again at evidentiary hearings. So at the end, we have what is usually a very thick record that takes up many binders, the 3 or 4 inch 3-ring binders, and has a lot of information, and we summarize it in a proposed tentative decision. And then we are grilled, and we have present this to the siting board, and then we're grilled on it. You know, why do you say this? Why do you say that? Why should we do this? Why should we do that? And everybody who intervenes has an opportunity to speak before the board and present their position, why the petition should be allowed or not allowed, or allowed with conditions. So in summary, who makes the decisions? Not us, the Energy Facilities Siting Board, but we assemble what is just an enormous amount of evidence and present it to the board.
Thank you. How do people who are viewing this meeting, how are we assured, or how will we be notified of future meetings of the Energy Facilities Siting Board, so that we can be aware of discussions, presentations, and be able to be present during those meetings?
Okay, the best way is to, as I said, is to, in my introduction, is to either intervene as an intervener or participate as a limited participant. And those people, the limited participants and the interveners, get notice of the public comment hearings. They get copies of the written questions that are sent and responded to, and they're generally kept in the loop of what's going on, and they can both address the board. The difference between the two is limited participants don't have the right to appeal, and they don't present their own witnesses, and they don't usually cross-examine witnesses. Sometimes we've had certain limited participants will say, well, I've got just 3 or 4 questions, and they'll submit them to us, and either I or one of my colleagues will ask those questions. But in general, the limited participants take a bit of a backseat to the interveners, but they're both entities, both groups are notified of everything that goes on.
That's great. Thank you, Mr.
May I add also, just if Mr. Yorkis, if you're interested in mostly in just following along and not as much participate, but we do have a website where there's a landing page for this project, and we post the information of what's going on while the process is going on that web page. You can click right onto the documents that the company is providing. You can, when we have our evidentiary hearings, when we go into hearings, we'll post that there. We'll post notice of the board meeting when we get to that stage. Before we go to the board meeting, staff issue a tentative decision, and that is what the staff think that the evidence say in the matter. And parties and limited participants are able to comment on it. So if the town is a participant here or an intervener, they can comment on it. So you can participate, or if you're just looking to stay informed about what's happening in the process, there is the ability to do that also.
Thank you very much. No, I'm a participant, not a watcher. I'm a participant.
Very good, sir.
Mr. Shea, one of the things in your introduction, words mean something to me.
Yes,
and
sir.
One of the things you said in your introduction is that this project will be located. And I am concerned that there is a presumption, listening to those words, that this project is going to be approved. I would have much preferred for you to say that this project is proposed to be located as opposed to will be located.
That's a good point, Mr. Yorkis. I think I should have said, sometimes what I usually say is the project would be located, and that's the way that the tentative decision is always written. The project would be located here. It would draw energy from the grid at night. It would dispatch this energy during peak times. And so it's we always use that as a conditional tense, and that was a slip of the tongue on my part. Excuse me, for which I apologize.
No, it's just I'm taking this proposal very seriously.
Yes, sir.
I have lived in Medway for 39 years. I am in close proximity to this. I've served on the economic. I am speaking only as a citizen, not in any public office holder capacity, but I've served on a number of offices on the Planning Board, on the Conservation Commission, on the Economic Development Committee, on Master Planning Committee. I'm very concerned about this proposal. One of the things, and the gentleman who from the public who spoke from Little Tree, I have a similar question. I'm not an attorney. I tried to read the law, and nowhere in the law did I find anything about battery storage systems being equal to generating systems. And I know that Mr. Green mentioned that the interpretation at this point in time is because it's exceeded a certain threshold. I'm not concerned about the threshold. I'm concerned about the function. And this is, according to every dictionary I have looked at, generation means the production of something. And this proposal is not the generation of something. It's the storage of something. And to that point, Ms. Wolf said that this is an energy storage facility, not an energy generation facility. I want to emphasize to all of you who are staff that that language, as I said earlier, means something. The language of laws, the language of statutes means something. And in the absence of the term storage, I think there is a very serious issue that staff and the Energy Facility Siting Board needs to consider.
Can I address that? That's a very good point. And I'm going to probably turn it over to someone with a better knowledge of physics than I have. But the distinction, let's say if you buy pencils and you store pencils, you're clearly just putting them in the supply closet and they'll come out the same way that they came in. Energy is really not like that. The storage generation dichotomy is not as stark. And therefore, I think as Mr. Kaplan has said, that ISO, the Independent System Operators of New England, view this as a generation facility. Mr. Kaplan?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
They do.
But ISO did not write the legislation. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts wrote the legislation. And your decision, I believe, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, because I think the public needs to understand this. Your function is within as staff members, and the Energy Facility Siting Board function is under Massachusetts state law.
Yes.
And I think that's what I and many other people are very concerned about.
Well, I can understand that, and certainly I can understand your concern. As Mr. Green noted, we have never ruled on this issue, the Siting Board. Now, I should say we, the Siting Board has never ruled on this issue about a energy storage system coming within our jurisdiction. For the issue you say is, storage is different from generation. But the petition has been filed, so now we must rule on it, and those issues will be explored. Is storage and generation, are they completely different? Let me just make an analogy. You understand that the concept of electrical current, in some ways electricity is a particle, but in some ways it's not a particle, it's a wave. You understand?
I do.
You understand that, right?
I do.
There's something, I'm not a physicist, but there is something similar in storage. It's not storage. Storage isn't a bad word for it, but it's not, as I said, it's not the same as storing pencils or storing your car in your garage. it's somewhat different. I don't know if there's anyone on the team, on the Medway Grid team, that would want to explain how storage is like.
Mr. Shea, if I could just sort of rewind a little bit to what you were saying before, which is that the proposed facility, and I do emphasize the word proposed, Mr. Yorkis, has been filed under the 69J and 1/4 statute, which has been noted, relates to generation facilities. The jurisdiction of the siting board to review and determine whether that facility is approved, denied, or approved with conditions is to be decided by the board. And the question is, I will say, novel in the sense that the board has not to date issued any decision on a battery storage facility subject to 69J and 1/4. So in some sense, this is really a case of first impressions. And I would surmise from your comments that you would probably be more concerned if the board had waived its jurisdiction and simply said, we have no role in this matter to review any of the questions that you've raised. We are proceeding in this investigation to investigate, explore the questions, legal and otherwise, including the jurisdictional issue that you're describing.
Well, first of all, thank you for your comments, because I appreciate it. There is land in the town of Medway that currently exists for energy generation right now. And some of that land is vacant. For reasons that have not been explained publicly, the applicant has chosen to expand that zone, circumventing zoning in the town of Medway, when existing land is zoned properly for this potential use, subject to the Energy Facilities Siting Board approval. And they have chosen instead not to work with the owners of the land that's already currently zoned. That is not the problem or the responsibility of the residents of the town of Medway. That's the problem associated with the applicant. The applicant could locate this facility anywhere. If I understand the ISO application, is they applied for the ability to have an battery energy storage system somewhere. It doesn't have to be at this specific site. And there is already vacant zone land that can address this. That's number one. Number two, the energy generated from this proposed facility does not benefit the ratepayers in the town of Medway at all. In terms of, I'm talking about electrical users. We have no benefit from this. This is a corporate decision to locate a facility in the town of Medway at land that is currently not zoned to accommodate what they are proposing, when existing land is already zoned for this facility. And I think it's really important for the staff and for the Energy Facilities Siting Board to carefully look at the alternatives that are currently available in the town of Medway if they choose to locate the plant, this facility in Medway. I think it's really important for this, for you as employees, as staff, as professionals in this industry to understand that. There is a great concern about the proposal and its proposed detrimental impact on this community. And the community many years ago intelligently zoned land for this kind of use, that another firm came in and developed a peaker plant, which you guys are probably familiar with. There's still vacant land there. And my position would be that it would be in the community's best interest that if a facility is approved, even if it's a facility under 1,000, that 1,000 limit, there's still a site where this could be installed and developed. And I wanted to make sure that is on this public record so everybody clearly understands that. Not everybody in this community is against this proposal. I am concerned about the proposal. I am concerned about the size of the proposal. I am concerned about the location of the proposal. But I am not against trying to have New England be energy independent and having America be energy independent. And I think there's a middle ground which I wish the applicant would take. And I'd be happy to respond to any of your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Yorkis. All the issues that you've raised, they're now on the record because we have a stenographer, and they will be all addressed in the coming months and in the tentative decision. And of course, as I said, you can be part of the case if you want to intervene or come in as a limited participant.
Thank you very much. I genuinely appreciate the time that has been extended to me and the professional responses I received. So thank you.
Mr. Yorkis, before you depart the panel, I just wanted to point out that I did share links with two websites that were mentioned in response to your questions. One is the members of the Energy Facility Siting Board, which, as Mr. Shea indicated, are the 9 individuals who do make the decisions for the EFSB. I hope you can see that in the chat box.
Yep.
And the second link is to the Medway Grid webpage that the EFSB has put together, which has really a nice compilation of all the relevant information that you may need in terms of the petition, procedures for filing if you seek intervention or limited participation, and a host of other information about this case, which will be updated as we proceed.
I got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it a great deal.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do we have another person who would like to speak?
We do. The next person raising their hand is Thomas Carson. I will move him to the panel. Has Mr. Carson joined us?
It looks like Mr. Carson is in the process of connecting to audio right now.
I don't know what the technical issue is with Mr. Carson, but perhaps we can move to the next commenter while he straightens out his audio connection. That would be Todd London.
Good day, Mr. London. Thank you for joining us.
Evening, everybody. How is everybody doing?
Very well, thank you.
So my name is Todd Lundin, Lundin. I live at 7 Little Tree Road in Medway, Massachusetts. My question is really around the environmental study that was done as part of the earlier part of the presentation. Really, my question's around, was there any assumptions or thoughts in regards to how the energy that is being brought into this storage facility, where that energy is sourced from, and what the economic impacts of those individual sources are as part of the study? I think it was a few of the commenters that mentioned the fact that there is the Exelon facility right nearby, which obviously would have an impact if it is being used to draw power off of. So I just wanted to understand what impact was considered when doing the environmental study.
Mr. Presiding Officer, would you like a response from the company?
Mr. Kaplan, I would love to hear from you.
Perhaps Ms. Wolf can address that.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, there's some programs in place that in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that are designed to try to ensure that when projects like this come onto the grid, they are maximizing the use of green energy sources and not using brown energy sources. So one of those programs is the Clean Peak program. And what that essentially does is the way that we could make money off of the project pushes us towards only purchasing power at times when it's likely being generated by green energy sources. The other sort of absent any kind of state program is just an economic one, which is that we would probably never charge off of the Exelon plant because that is top dollar. That is only going to fire up at a peak time. And because they're very in demand at that time, they can charge the highest amount of any generator. So we have, the business model of battery storage is to buy low and sell slightly higher. And what energy sources are basically selling low is offshore wind energy at night. So it wouldn't make economic sense, I guess you can say, for us as a battery supplier to charge off of the Exelon plant, for example, or frankly, any fossil peaker plant, because we would never make any money. So that's just probably one component of your question, but feel free to clarify and I can expand upon that.
Yeah, no, that definitely clarifies. I guess I have a follow-up there, if you don't mind. Is part of the plan from a long-term perspective, you speak about the business model and how you leverage that. Is there a part in the plan in which you would provide reporting to kind of make sure that environmental integrity of what you just said there is held throughout? Or is that really just something that is the desire, but obviously as the economics change, you would change that decision? I guess to my point is that is there public record that would you'd be held accountable to, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm guessing that the Commonwealth is going to have reporting protocols where over time they and we evaluate the percentage of where the energy is ultimately coming from. I'm sort of guessing at this number, but I think something like 50% of the current sources on the Commonwealth grid maybe are renewable. And so there's probably some estimation you could do on what percentage of the battery project is currently being charged by renewable sources. But then over time, as the Commonwealth rolls out more and more renewable sources, the anticipation is that we'll get closer and closer to 100%. So I don't know for sure if a reporting protocol is going to be required, but I'm guessing that there will be some evaluation from the state just based on the state of charge report and other kind of policies that they have where they're basically trying to maximize the renewable energy that is on the grid. And if anyone else knows the answer to that question, happy to defer to them on it. So I guess my best guess is my best answer, but also happy to research it further and can reach out to you with further information if that would be helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. London.
Our next speaker is Mr. Myers again. Move him back to the panel.
Thank you very much. I want to say I echo and support the comments that were made by Mr. Yorkis. I did want to bring up three things. Relative to the definition, I think ISO section 3.1.10.6 in the definition for electric storage defines a storage facility as a facility that is capable of receiving electricity from the grid and storing the energy for later injection of electricity back to the grid. So ISO does have a definition that does not say that it is generating. However, they do not have a rate tariff for storage. And so the rate tariff is why it's a generation, but the definition is clearly different. And then if I go and look at FERC Order 841-62, Section 61-127 in 2018, the final rule revised Section 35.38B has a definition of energy storage that calls it a resource capable of receiving electric energy from the grid and storing it for later injection of electricity back to the grid. So there are some definitions available for EFSB to use that clearly do not call the energy storage activity a generation activity at the federal level. And I could go on to cite one with DOE through the National Renewable Energy Labs, but I won't. Before I get to my question, I do have one other comment. A few minutes ago, the statement was made that perhaps offshore wind would be a source for Medway Grid project to be used. And it's my understanding that offshore wind farms that are off the coast of Massachusetts are not going to be in operation for another, I'll say, 4 or more years. And so the question would be, what is Medway Grid's plan for the next 4 years from the time of startup until offshore wind comes in to source renewable energy? And that would be particularly important in the winter season when you don't have solar to draw upon. You'd have to be drawing upon peakers, which is why I made my comments earlier from an emissions perspective, that in effect, energy storage just provides a resilience for some outages or a few other operational things, frequency regulation, but it does not necessarily reduce emissions because the source would be different. Within, and my question, within the, because residents from Little Tree Road are on the phone, within Secretary Theoharidis's environmental notice letter, there's a statement that talks about noise and the identification that there will be a noise issue when the inverters in the system are operating at greater than 25% capacity. And within that paragraph of the ENF is a discussion of FERC being able to declare specific conditions that would require Medway Grid to operate the system above 25% capacity, thereby generating noise. And the noise restriction that the secretary placed was between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Well, the peak period generally for some of the dinner is the dinner hour, late afternoon hours on that. So under what conditions, question for the applicant is, under what conditions can ISO dictate operation above the 25%, and how, a question for the town is, how will the town handle that additional noise problem for the residents on Little Tree Road? Thank you.
Does the company want to respond to that question?
We appreciate Mr. Myers' response. There was a lot that he said, some of which I believe is incorrect, some of which is not verifiable. So I would like to defer and figure out what his exact issues are, and we can respond at that time.
from the town's perspective, I would concur to the extent that I'm not 100% sure what Charlie was talking about, so we'll do a little bit more research on that.
It was a paragraph within the ENF letter from the secretary that the noise question was specific to what I was talking about, that addressed an operational restriction specific to noise between the time period of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. unless FERC called or declared a certain condition.
Thank you for saying it, Charlie. I still don't totally understand it, so we're going to find somebody smarter than me to figure it out.
I could just add, Charlie, that we think this will be an extremely rare occurrence, that this sort of override would occur. I think it's happened something like 7 times in the last 10 years, 7 single days within the last 10 years. It's actually in the middle of the night that the noise restrictions are most severe, because that's when the baseline noise levels are the lowest. So it will probably not be at the time that you mentioned, but we are going to respond to this more fully in the SEIR, because we did get a similar question through ENF Q&A. So you'll be able to get kind of a more fulsome response that way.
Ms. Wolf, to repeat, I'm sorry, we'll respond to this more fully and then you said some initials, which I didn't catch.
Oh, sorry. The
In our
SEIR.
response to the ENF.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, and I think at this, my understanding is that because this is a legal proceeding and I want to make sure that everything that the EFSB is hearing are facts and not guesses or assumptions, I would hope that I'd like to take sort of all the questions at once. And then if you have follow-up or somebody has follow-up, we can respond in writing so that we actually have researched some of the issues that are being brought up tonight, as opposed to just a guess.
Okay, and then when you respond in writing, can you send that to me and we'll post it on the website?
Yes, if we actually, let me think about that, how we would do that.
Okay, think about that. What were the initials that you said, though, Ms. Wolf? I didn't catch them.
I said SEIR. That's through our MEPA process. Yes.
The single environmental impact report.
Yes.
And that report, when it gets filed with MEPA, will be submitted as part of our package to the EFSB. So that's, I believe, would be responsive to Mr. Meyer's question and could be posted on the, obviously would be posted on your website.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that answer. Do we have anyone else who'd like to comment, Mr. Green?
If there is anyone else who would like to comment, I don't see anyone raising their hand. I shouldn't have said that so quickly. Sorry, the hand went down just as quickly as it went up. If you would like to comment, please raise your hand. Okay. Very strange. Anselin Wolf has raised. I'm going to promote Anselin to the panel and we'll see if a comment is forthcoming or not.
Good evening.
Good evening. I had a basic question that deals with noise, just a more general question. We live very close by the proposed project, and we already hear a fair amount of noise for Route 109. And I'm wondering what the ambient noise level will be if this project goes ahead.
Christina, would you like to answer that?
Sure, and I might actually also call my colleague Justin, but the noise report delineates what the ambient noise levels are today at different times of day. And we are not allowed to bring it more than 6 decibels above ambient with our project. So at certain times of day or night, I recall the baseline ambient noise is something like 35, I'm guessing, I'm not looking at the report, we're not allowed to bring it more than 6 dB above that, so it would be 41. So it will vary based on the time of day, what the baseline is, what then the new noise level will be. But essentially the Mass DEP rule is you cannot bring it much above what it is today. And certain noises have to be stripped out in what is even considered a baseline, such as traffic noise. So it ends up giving you a pretty low baseline that you have to start with. And Justin, you might have further thoughts because you're our noise expert.
Yeah, so you're correct. It wouldn't be raised more than 6 dB above the ambient. And 6 dB is a threshold because anything above 6 dB is noticeable. Anything below a 6 dB increase, you wouldn't notice the difference between what is currently the current noise level in your area.
Thank you. The other question I have concerns what happens to air quality in the event of what you're calling a thermal event. I'm sure you've looked into this, but I am not up to speed on it. And as a close-in resident, I would welcome some information. I mean, accidents do happen despite our best planning.
Who would like to respond to that?
Christina, would you like to respond?
Sure. I mean, I can try a sort of a late, I'm not the technical expert, so my response may not be as robust as what we could answer in writing. But air quality impacts should be limited in the case of a thermal event. There are studies which we can probably provide more information about as to sort of what the nature of content would be in the case of a thermal event. Some studies indicate that there would be no impact. I think we're going to essentially plan for like a worst case scenario, and happy to provide more information again in interrogatories via written response. But the systems do sort of, they are designed to, I guess you could say, vent air in the case of a thermal event. So I don't want to go as far as saying that there may never be any contaminants because that seems unlikely. So I guess more information to follow.
That would be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wolf. I see that it looks like Thomas Carson has raised his hand.
Mr. Carson is in the panel, so just he needs to unmute.
Oh, okay. Mr. Carson is a member of the panel, all right, not a member of the public. Is there anyone from?
Well, I believe he is trying to provide a comment.
Right, trying to join here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Carson,
can.
we can hear you. Yes, we can't see you, but we can hear you. So.
Okay, well, that's probably for the better then if you can't see me, but as long as you can hear me. I had a couple of questions and one general explanation to try to differentiate between generation and storage. I'm a retired power plant engineer. I worked in the industry for 40 plus years. Generating electric power requires a change from either chemical or nuclear energy to thermal energy and then to electric energy. So that's generating electric energy. Storage is just what somebody mentioned before. You're just using the battery to take electric energy in, and then electric energy goes out. So you're not generating, when you generate electricity, you're changing energy forms from chemical or nuclear to thermal, and then thermal to electrical through steam turbines and that type of equipment. And there's waste heat depending on the efficiency of the process. None of that's going to occur here because you're just taking electric energy that's already been generated, putting it in the batteries, and then releasing them at a later time. So that's a very watered down version of the difference between generating and storage. So if anybody's concerned about the problems you have at power stations with the release of thermal or gases or anything like that. There's nothing going on here with that. The one concern I do have, though, goes back to the thermal event or the fire of the battery. I know you said that there are no liquids in the batteries, but in order to put the fire out, I'm not sure what the recommended method is. Generally, it's a bad idea to spray water on an electrical fire, but they might use chemicals or foam suppressants or whatever. But whatever is in those batteries, if the fire is bad enough, is going to get out. And you're going to have contaminants mixed in with the water or foam or whatever was used to put the fire out. So I would go back to Mr. Yorkis's comment about maybe siting this thing on the land in Medway that's already zoned for power generation, which would be the Exelon site, I assume. It would make more sense. They probably have some sort of containment system there because they're storing fossil fuels there and ammonia and that sort of thing to contain any water that would be used to put out a fire. And then the other general question I have is, it looks like the state's goal is to have 1,000 megawatt hours of storage capacity with batteries. It looks like Medway's being asked to pick up fully half of that, 50% of the state's entire goal. That seems like a lot. 500 megawatts is a lot of power. That's the size of a medium-sized power station. That's a big amount of energy. And, there is going to be noise from the inverters and stuff when you move that kind of energy around. It seems like Medway picking up fully half of what the state's goals are seems like a big burden for Medway. Were any other sites considered, or a smaller amount? Or I don't know what the site investigation was. I know the proximity to the grid is desirable. So, but that's so those are my comments.
Sir, can I ask you to give us your address? We usually get the name and address of people when they first comment.
Sure. I'm sorry. It's Thomas Carson, Carson. I'm at 3 Sledding Hill Way in Medway. That's 3 words, Sledding Hill Way in Medway. I've been a Medway resident since 1975.
Thank you very much, sir. And Anselin Wolf, who just spoke recently, we didn't get your address either, if you're still on. Ms. Wolf, I see you there. Yes, if you could give us your address, we'd be grateful. Thank you.
3 Kingston Lane, Unit 3. So
Thank
that's
you very much.
condominium complex directly across Route 109.
Okay, very good, sir. Very good, ma'am. Thank you very much. I appreciate both of you. Thanks for your comments. Is there anyone else that, Mr. Green, is on the people who want to speak, members of the public would like to speak?
I am not seeing any additional comment requests.
Okay, well then, before we conclude the public comment hearing this evening, I would like to remind everyone of the opportunity to participate in the Siting Board's review of the project if you desire. We would encourage anyone who does seek to participate to review the information on different types of participation that is listed in the public comment hearing notice for this proceeding and is also listed on the Siting Board website. If you don't have a copy of the notice and you'd like one, or you'd like a copy of the intervention rules, just send your contact information to my email at robert.j.green robert.shea, S-H-E-A, @mass.gov. And I can send the information to you by email. But you must use the correct email address with the dot before the J and the dot after the Shea. There's someone else named Robert Shea who works for the Commonwealth. And otherwise, if you just put robert.shea, it'll go to that other person. Any written comments that you might wish to file or any petitions to participate further in the evidentiary hearing should be sent to me at my email address of robert.j.shea@mass.gov. Comments are due by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, July 27th, 2022, and petitions to participate as an intervener or limited participants are also due by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. In addition, any petitions or comments must be sent by email or email attachment to the counsel for Medway Grid, Andrew O. Kaplan, Esquire of the firm of Pierce Atwood, LLP, with a copy sent to Mr. Kaplan's assistant, Ann O'Hanlon. Mr. Kaplan's email address is akaplan, AKAPLAN, @Pierce Atwood. Pierce Atwood is PIERCEATWOOD.com. Ms. O'Hanlon's email address is AOHANLON @Pierce Atwood, PIERCEATWOOD.com. Please send comments and petitions, to both Mr. Kaplan and to Ms. O'Hanlon. If you want a clarification on anything I have said during this hearing, email me at my work email address, robert.j.shea, S-H-E-A, @mass.gov. If not, please feel free to write to us anytime before Wednesday, July 27th, 2022, which is the deadline for the receipt of public comment in this docket. Thank you all for your participation in this hearing tonight. Good night.